Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating contrast. The thrilling, almost Hollywood-level myth of suppressed technology versus the very real, highly documented, and honestly kind of startling bureaucratic reality of how it actually happens. We're going to see how our public obsession with miracle inventions completely clashes with how governments actually control technological progress.
And to do that, we kind of have to start with the drama. Picture this. March 21, 1998. An inventor named Stanley Meyer is having lunch at a restaurant in Ohio. Suddenly, he runs out into the parking lot, collapses, and with his dying breath utters three infamous words: "They poisoned me." That single, terrifying moment essentially birthed a massive internet legend. You see, Meyer claimed he had invented a dune buggy that ran entirely on water. Coming off the heels of the 1970s oil crisis, he swore his water fuel cell could get a car from LA to New York on just 22 gallons of water. It's the ultimate David versus Goliath story, right? It made millions of people wonder, was this guy literally assassinated to protect the global fossil fuel monopoly? Did the established energy markets just snuff him out?
Well, let's look at the science for a second, because there's a huge gap between his claims and the unbreakable laws of physics. Meyer said his cell used electrical resonance to split water into hydrogen and oxygen without needing much energy. But scientifically speaking, splitting water is an endothermic process. It requires a substantial energy input, exactly 286 kilojoules per mole. Burning that hydrogen later, that's exothermic, and it releases that exact same amount of energy. Actually, scratch that. Because of friction and heat loss, the energy you need to split the water will always be greater than what you get back. So his engine? It was an impossible perpetual motion machine.
And it didn't take long for the legal system to catch up with the physics. By 1996, his investors were suing him. A judge brought in 3 independent engineers to look at the tech, and they found nothing. No revolutionary process. It was literally just a standard, super low-efficiency electrolysis unit. The judge slammed the whole thing as a gross and egregious fraud and made Meyer pay everyone back. Plus, Meyer notoriously refused to let anyone do independent, peer-reviewed testing on his buggy.
So, what about the assassination? The mundane truth is right there in the coroner's report. Police investigated, did full forensic toxicology, and found absolutely zero traces of any known poison. Tragically, Meyer died of a ruptured brain aneurysm, which lined up perfectly with his documented history of severe hypertension. We all love a dramatic cover-up story when it comes to breakthrough tech, but the truth here was just biology.
But here is the massive pivot. While water-powered cars are a thermodynamic fantasy, the suppression of technology is absolutely real. It just doesn't happen with hitmen in restaurant parking lots. It happens in boring bureaucratic offices. Get a load of these numbers. As of 2018, there were 5,792 active patent secrecy orders in effect. And just in fiscal year 2024, 356 new orders were slapped on inventions. The government absolutely suppresses thousands of real, functional technologies for national security. This all comes back to a very real piece of legislation, the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. This is a sweeping law giving defense agencies the power to review your patent application. If they decide your invention might hurt national security, the Patent Office straight up won't grant your patent. Even wilder, you are legally gagged from talking about your own technical details to anyone. If you violate that order, you lose the patent, face massive fines, and could even go to prison. And yes, this applies to everyday independent John Doe inventors working in their garages. If we map this out, it's like a giant policy pendulum. The modern system kicked off during World War II, reviewing over 11,000 patents to protect things like radar and cryptography. In 1951, it became permanent. Then, in 1985, the Reagan administration realized, hey, science kind of needs to be open to work, so they issued NSDD 189 to protect fundamental academic research. But jump to 2021 with NSPM 33, and we're back to aggressive security mandates to lock down research against foreign exploitation. Back and forth, secrecy and open innovation.
And we have to acknowledge there's a heavy, measurable cost to all this secrecy. Declassified WWI records show 8,500 patents were suppressed. Sure, it kept sensitive tech away from the access powers, but empirically it caused a massive drop in follow-on patent citations. It basically severed the branches of our own domestic innovation. And the biggest losers? Independent private inventors without government contracts. They were just left in the dark, totally isolated, unable to build on their own breakthroughs.
Section 1. The Academic Battlefield, Export Controls and Open Science. Fast forward to today, and that battleground for technological suppression, it's moved out of the private garage and landed squarely on the university campus. The U.S. relies on these massive, highly divided export control structures to manage global information flow. You've got the Department of Commerce handling EAR for dual-use stuff, tech with both civilian and military uses, and then the Department of State handles ITAR, which is the really strict stuff, actual munitions and military tech.
But here's where it gets legally mind-bending for universities: the deemed export rule. Under these rules, if you let a foreign national access sensitive lab equipment or technical data inside the United States, the law treats it as if you just exported that tech to their home country. Think about that for a second. Letting a brilliant international grad student use a specialized microscope can legally be classified as an international arms export.
Now, why the intense crackdown? Well, it's largely a strategic response to foreign adversaries, specifically China's military-civil fusion, or MCF strategy. This isn't a secret. It's a state-led effort to siphon global intellectual property from civilian academia and private industry, especially in AI, quantum computing, and aerospace, and funnel it directly into advancing the People's Liberation Army.
So you can see the nightmare this creates for university administrators. They are caught in this crazy structural tension. On one side, they've got the Cold War-era NSDD 189 saying, keep fundamental research open, that's how we innovate. On the other side, modern directives like NSPM 33 are screaming at them to lock down the labs, restrict foreign talent programs, and heavily scrutinize international partnerships to stop IP theft.
And don't think this is just an engineering problem. It has totally infected the life sciences too, through something called DIRC, or Dual-Use Research of Concern. This is a massive protective architecture demanding strict institutional oversight if you're working with 15 specific high-consequence pathogens, stuff like Ebola or anthrax, or 7 specific types of experimental outcomes. Obviously, the goal is to make sure biological knowledge isn't weaponized.
But researchers are pulling their hair out over this DURC framework because it's a complete paradox. Bioethicists will tell you it's somehow too narrow and too broad at the exact same time. It's too narrow because it relies on a static list of known bugs, which means it might completely blindside us on novel threats from new synthetic biology. But it's too broad because the administrative red tape is so thick it drastically slows down totally benign, highly critical public health research. So who has the answer here? Well, top organizations like IEEE USA are stepping into the debate. They completely acknowledge that, yes, export controls are absolutely essential for national security. But they're also drawing a line in the sand, arguing that proactively funding and fostering fundamental research domestically is really the only reliable way to guarantee long-term economic prosperity and security. Taking it a step further, the IEEE USA strongly urges that publishing fundamental research has to remain as unrestricted as possible. Because the reality is, science doesn't happen in a vacuum. It relies on international collaboration. We saw the data from World War II. If we get overly restrictive with our secrecy, we actually stultify our own domestic innovation. We could literally isolate ourselves right out of global technological leadership.
So we are left with this incredibly profound, delicate trade-off. We've moved way past the fun conspiracy myths of Stanley Meyer's water car and right into the teeth of the very real, very complex bureaucratic machinery of technological containment. The big question I want you to take away from this explainer is this. As global competition heats up, how do we protect our most sensitive, critical national secrets without suffocating the exact academic openness and global collaboration that drives human progress forward? It's a balance we are very much still struggling to find.